Yeah, so I will talk about responsible AI, which as was told was very important. And the first question I want to answer is why responsible AI? Why not ethical AI? That is the term that some people use. Well, the reason is that things like ethics, justice, trust are human characteristics. And then we shouldn't try to humanize algorithms or machines. And that's why we don't like to associate ethical to a machine, and we don't use ethical AI. A lot of people is using also trustworthy AI, but as I said, also trust is a human characteristic. But there are other even more problems because we know that AI doesn't work all the time. So why we should ask people to trust something that we know doesn't work all the time? That's not ethical. And also we are putting the burden on the user, not on the builder of these tools. And when we say AI is responsible, we are not meaning that the tool is responsible because it doesn't have any legal entity, but we mean to design AI in a responsible way, and that the owners of that system are responsible for any harm. So this is why we want to use responsible AI. Now, if you look at this book by Cesar Hidalgo and collaborators, How Humans Judge Machines, it seems that humans are much harsher with machines than people. So basically, to err is human, but that's not true for algorithms. Before I talk about responsible AI, I would like to talk about irresponsible AI. And this is like the list of the main things that you can find: automated discrimination, AI phrenology, I will explain what is that, unfair e-commerce, pure incompetence, and also waste of computing resources. And for example, there are some databases that have more than 2,000 incidents on problems with AI. And that's why in the Institute, and there you have the URL, we have done an atlas of irresponsible AI with different views. For example, here is a geographic view, where you see if you take the US and the China, that accounts for like 50% of the problems in this other smaller database is called awful AI. Now, the main problem that we find is discrimination, and that has to do with bias. And we need to remember that data is always biased, so not always is negative. And this is the first bias we have, that we think that bias is something negative, when in principle it's something neutral. There are things like gender parity that are positive bias. Most of the time, algorithms don't care about this negative bias, and they output the same bias, and even worse, sometimes they amplify the bias, and there are many examples where the bias is amplified. If the bias is amplified, we cannot blame the data. And very important, bias is not only in the data, it's also in the algorithm, and it's also in the user interaction with the algorithm. And you can check this in my paper, Bias on the Web, and Communication of ACM on 2018. But can be complicated. For example, in 2020, when the UK decided to predict the scores for the last exam for high schools, they discriminated poor students. And here is the first ethical issue. There is no real relation, there's no real dependency of what is my performance to the performance of other people. Every person is different. Not because I'm poor, I will fail. Of course, that may be more probable, but in practice, it's not always the case. And then you have these ethical issues. Another case that is a case coming from the algorithm, in 2021, an Italian court found that this delivery app was discriminating, and the reason was not so simple. The reason was that basically the system was giving little work to people that couldn't deliver at night, where there was almost all the demand. So the solution was easy: give more people, give more work to people that only can deliver at night, during the day. And the worst example maybe happened the same year, January in 2021, when after a long process, the Supreme Court of the Netherlands decided that a fraud detection algorithm in childcare benefits was illegal. There is already was an ethical issue because you shouldn't look for fraud in poor people. These are vulnerable people. You should look fraud first in rich people, not in poor people. And then the whole government had to resign because of the pressure of the opposition in 2021. So this is maybe the worst political impact of an algorithm in the world. But there are other examples like physiognomy. Physiognomy is this pseudo belief that comes from the 19th century that depending on your face, you have certain personality. Now people is using it for different things, like Kosinski from Stanford in 2017 decided to use faces to predict sexual orientation. Of course, this is pseudoscience. You cannot predict sexual orientation correctly with looking just at the face. Of course, there were some spurious correlations with maybe with beard, hair, and so on. But you cannot do this. 1 year early, was even people in China that claimed that you could predict criminality, like in the Minority Report movie, using face images. They got a lot of negative feedback. You can still find their revised version in archive. But this happened again in 2020, where people in the US tried to publish in Nature a paper that luckily was stopped by one person that said that this was not ethical. We cannot predict criminality based in faces. While in 21, Kosinski came back exposing by his beliefs that you could predict the political orientation of people using facial biometrics. Of course, it's not true. Again, a lot of spurious correlations. But this is a case of modern phrenology. Basically, modern phrenology was an idea of the 18th century that claimed that people that were criminal had different convolutions in their brain. And even later, people claim in Italy that was not convolutions in the brain, but was shapes of the skull of these people. So basically, they thought that they were different, but of course, this is a pseudoscience. This makes no sense. But can we be worse? In 2019, people from MIT published this paper that claim that using your voice, they can basically predict your face. You can check, again, maybe I can believe that your mouth has to do with how you speak, but in general, it's not true. And then I can have my master phrenology algorithm where you send me a voice message, I reconstruct your face, and then I know if you're a political opposer, if you are homosexual, and this is, in some countries, it's basically an offense. You can be a criminal, and I can know your name. Yes, Mitre got a patent granted last year, was granted 2022. This is only when was the application. But of course, this doesn't work. For example, you cannot guess the name of all adopted children from other ethnic origins in the US, for example. And this is much worse because it can be very subtle. So, for example, people is saying, oh, we can use AI to detect emotions. Well, a famous neuroscientist from Northeastern, Lisa Feldman-Barrett, excellent TED Talk I recommend it, show that people cannot recognize emotions. Some people do different things when they're happy or when they're sad. So we just rediscovered stereotypes. So if people can recognize emotions, AI even less because it's using data labeled by people. Another problem is basically, as I said before, stupidity. In 1976, George Box says all models are wrong, but some are useful. Well, for example, when in 2020, Elon Musk said use Signal, some automated systems that try to maximize stock thought that he was talking about buying this company stock, and that value went to the roof. But of course, he was talking about using the Signal chat app, and a lot of people lost money. Or for example, here we have an example of adversarial AI, where if you change one pixel, you change the classifier output with very high confidence. So the question is what these classifiers are learning if you can change the output with just one pixel. And something that may look funny, but the engineer in Facebook decided in 2021 to use an English train system in France. And basically, the filter decided that the town of Bitche had to disappear because it was a bad word. And they were 3 weeks without their Facebook page because no one was checking the problem. If they were using the Facebook page to, for example, inform about COVID, this is really complicated. This may harm people. So let me remind you the limitations of this kind of data. You cannot learn what is not in the data. Data is a proxy of reality. Data doesn't capture the whole context. Very important. In particular, you cannot capture things that have never happened. In 2018, a self-driving car by Uber killed a woman that crossed in a road at night in the wrong place. And then the system didn't recognize there was a woman in a bicycle. And the driver, the backup driver that was inside, didn't react on time, had only 2 seconds to react, and then the person died in the hospital. We will get back to this. So I don't care how good is your system. I think evaluating success is a mistake. Will be like saying this drug works 90% of the time, and we don't know what happened with the other 10% of the time. What I really need to know is the impact of errors. Does people get harmed, or basically there's no harm there? Also depends. For illness detection, false negatives might be worse than false positives. And for example, conditional freedom, false positives will be worse than false negatives. Depends on the problem. So next time, when you are not sure about something, when the confidence of the system is low, please the system should say, I don't know. Shouldn't output whatever believes is right. This is what the smart people do when they don't know. They say, I don't know. By the way, Uber, after this accident, decided to sell their self-driving unit because they realized that was a very difficult problem, and that's why we still don't see them in all places. And this is also a very good example for accountability, because who is responsible? You will say Uber is responsible. Well, not, because they settled with the family of the victim very fast. And also they told the state of Arizona that the backup driver was basically watching a video. And then that person was charged. She was a woman, Mexican origin, earning minimal salary. And at the end, she had to basically be 1 year at home because she was found guilty. And only recently, last year, she talked about what happened. She was a transgender person, and basically that was almost the only word she could find. And she was a very vulnerable person, and she was the one that basically suffered for the error of Uber. So the second part, principles are instruments, because values, ethical values are only 3: autonomy, respect of the human dignity, do good and not do bad, and justice, be fair. And here I have a table that we use at our institute of properties of AI that can be associated to these 3 core values of ethics. So autonomy has things like transparency, agency, consent, privacy, explainability, and so on. And justice, for example, accountability, while harm benefit is, for example, scientific basis, and so on. So in 2017, the HCM, the main professional body in computer science, had some principles that were updated last October. I'm one of the main 2 authors of the last set of principles. And in yellow, I put the ones that are really important. I will get back to them soon. In 21, also, we had the EU proposal, which is called the AI Act, that is based on risk. So they have 4 risk level: forbidden, high risk, low risk, and no risk. And the first problem is, should we regulate the use of technology? I don't believe so. This is the first time we will do it. And if we start regulating technology, we need to do regulations for blockchain, for quantum computing, and for any new technology. And those regulations should be consistent with each other, which is much harder. We need to regulate problems like data protection, not technology. And what about risk? Well, risk is another problem because risk is a continuous variable. It's like a skin color. Doesn't make any sense to have categories based on skin color, and doesn't make any sense to have categories based on risk. And this is a cognitive bias that we have as humans. And I recommend to read this very interesting paper on the dangers of categorical thinking. That is something that we do when we shouldn't do. Last October, the White House published the blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights, which is a weird name because it's not really a Bill of Rights. It's just 5 principles. And sadly, these 5 principles are more close to the 2017 ICM version and not to the new one. Here I compare them, and you see that the new ones are much more complete, but there is a mapping, reasonable mapping between these two, and the White House is missing 2 of them. Now, how we do the governance of this? Well, these have to be in operation in a sequence. So, for example, the first one is legitimacy and competence. You do an ethical risk assessment to make sure that your system should exist, so there are more benefits than harms, and also you have the competence to build it. Not only the technical competence, but also the domain competence, and very important, the administrative competence. You have the permission to do it. In many cases, because the person didn't have really the permission to do it. Then you can do a lot of validation and testing when you do the design. In operation, you can do monitoring tools, very important. And then if it fails, we need to do maybe an anonymous audit. And when it harms people, we may go to court. That's outside our field, but that is to basically to have accountability and responsibility. So in the Institute, we are working on trying to understand a system that really works in practice, and they're based of having humans in the loop and very good data. And we have a responsible AI practice where we work with companies. And this is our model that you can find on our website. It has 3 branches: governance, AI ethics analysis, and training. And for this, we also do registries of models and data and audits. And very important, we created the first worldwide AI ethics advisory board. So any company that has a difficult problem on AI ethics can basically ask for a private advice to our experts. We have 45 experts from all over the world in all possible areas. So there are some real ethical dilemmas. The typical one in the corner that you see is this one about the trolley problem. And forget about this problem. You will never have this problem in real life. But let me put you a real problem that we have today where the solution is not trivial. This is people killed by cars. I know that many less people will killed by self-driving cars because they don't do things that humans do, like sleep in the wheel, or for example, watching on the phone, or basically driving too fast. But the problem is that some people that before were not in danger of dying will be killed. Typically, here we will save a lot of men driving fast, and maybe we will kill old women or women crossing very slow street, and the system didn't recognize was a person because it was too slow. And also maybe we will kill children that will cross very fast, and the system didn't realize that the child can go so fast to become a ball and become like a ball, and the system doesn't recognize it. So is this ethical? Save a lot of men that are driving fast and kill basically vulnerable people that before were not in danger of dying? Well, I don't have an answer. This may be cultural. Maybe in India, they prefer not to kill anyone. And maybe in Germany, they prefer to do it because it will be better at the end in the cost benefit. So we need to work in this for this Ben Schneiderman called human-centered AI. This is one of the slides from his book. I don't like trustworthy certification. I already said trustworthy is a bad word. Certification also is very hard to do. We need to certify the process like ISO 9000. We cannot certify models. Models change too fast. And the future will be AI, helping AI to do responsible software. Maybe ChatGPT coding may help on doing that responsible. So to finish, this is what I see today with the hype of AI. I'd like to go to this right side column responsible AI, where we are taking off things well. We are doing ethical risk assessment. We are doing error analysis on the harm that we cause. We are doing thorough tests and not ask people to test it. We have transparency and contestability. We have humans in charge, and then we have accountability and responsibility. So I think we can have some few minutes for questions. Thank you.